Well, hello, John. It's really nice to be having this conversation. This is a pretty nice evening, and I'm really excited to be speaking with you today.
Good evening, Olo. It's great to be on the show.
Okay, so could you just do an introduction of who you are and what the organization, the company is that you represent?
Of course. No, so my name is John Ahlberg. I'm the founder of a new company, a new startup out of Sweden, Gothenburg, called Kärnfull Energy, or Kärnfull Energi, as it's in Swedish. And basically, we are the first 100% nuclear electricity provider in Sweden. This is something that we started with this year. It's been moving along ever since August when we released the first press release, and now we've gone live and operational, and is grabbing quite a lot of attention. So that's the reason I'm here today, at least.
It's nice to have you here. So, for the listeners that are not familiar, could you just paint a mental picture of what Sweden is like from a community standpoint and just from people standpoint? So what is Sweden like? Because I know over the recent years we might think of things like IKEA and maybe Greta Thunberg, if that's what people listen to. So what is Sweden like for people who are not very familiar with the country?
Well, that's a difficult question, Olo, but I think Sweden is a lot what you read in the magazines, right? I mean, we are the IKEA Volvo country. I think it's an interesting one from the business that we're in now, electricity wide, because it's a very long country. It's far from the north to the south, if you like, and it's stretched out, so that causes differences in the way people are, but also in the sense of electricity. It causes issues when you try to produce electricity in the north, but you have people living in the south, for example. So, but Sweden's a great place. I've lived around the world, in Japan, in the UK, and in France before, and coming back home has really been one of the best moves I've made. It's a lovely country, nice people, and I think what you get, what you see is what you get with Swedes in general.
Okay, so let's talk a bit about your background before you moved into current full energy. I know I'm not pronouncing it
That's
right from the
perfect.
Swedish standpoint, but I think that's the
Well, not
best.
from the Swedish
Okay,
one, but I mean
so
the international one. So that's perfect. Well, I mean
okay, so
my background. So I was born in 1982. Brought up in a family of engineers. Surrounded by brainiacs. I'm not one of them. I'm a marketing guy. More of an entrepreneur, or a creative soul, if you like. But I've always had that aspiration around me that people introduce me to technology, and I've always picked it up and try to make the best of it. I guess I'm an early adopter in that sense. I like to pick up new things and learn as I go. I was brought up in Sweden, even though like you mentioned before the interview started, my accent is more of an American style. I think it boils down to a lot of Miami Vice and a lot of 21 Jump Street TV shows, and my great cousins who are big role models to me. They're in the U.S. So that accent is from there. But I lived in Sweden up until the age of I guess 2004. So 22, I left to go to Sapporo to Japan and study for a while. And then after that, I came back to Japan in 2006, studied some more. So I have an education in marketing and business administration from the Swedish Gothenburg University, and that gave us the chance to go to Japan and learn about Japanese economics and Japanese culture as well, and learn the language. So I stayed there for some time, and then moved on to London actually, and worked for the Swedish Chamber of Commerce for a few years in communications as well. So it was quite early. I went for this area of trying to explain things that are difficult to understand in more of an understandable manner. So after the Swedish Chamber of Commerce, I stumbled across a company that created authentication products, which is basically these kind of tokens, RSA style tokens that you use for your banking online, and those are difficult and not very well appreciated. But I became the communications manager for that company, and that led me into a 10-year spell in the fintech industry. So which also took me to France, working for a French company, and also in this digital security space. So that's pretty much it. Coming up to now, always working hard to try to make complex things more understandable, which is suitable, I guess, in the nuclear industry as well.
Yeah. So you've had quite a long journey, but I've showed you that the trend is that most of your career has either been in marketing or communication. So what was really the tie-in to the nuclear industry? How did you really get interested with it, and how did you go from being interested in the industry to jumping in and said, okay, I want to start a company that focuses mainly on the nuclear industry?
I guess there's a lot of factors, and it's a good question. I mean, I've always been passively optimistic and positive to nuclear, which is not very common, I guess, for Swedes brought up in the 80s. There were a lot of scares and a large anti-nuclear movement in Sweden, but my father had studied nuclear back in his university days, and he always told me about the great power plants that were supplying Sweden with this great electricity, and the high quality electricity, and explained that there were no emissions coming out of them. So I've always been, positive towards nuclear, and then it's never really, made sense for me in my career to look further at it. But then something happened, I guess, in 2018. I started reading about TerraPower, being a Bill Gates a fan, if you like, and learning more about the art of waste recycling, etc. And I was intrigued. And then I guess the IPCC report came out, and I was just a bit taken aback of the fact that it was so clear that we needed so much more nuclear energy and to be able to reach the climate goals of the world. So that, I guess, in my kind of creative mind, spawned the idea, because also the conversation in Sweden at that time, I guess towards the end of 2018, it wasn't very active on nuclear at all, actually, but something started to happen in the public debate around it, which caught my attention. And I said to my good friend Christian, who's the co-founder of Kärnfull as well, that someone ought to open a 100% nuclear and electricity provider. And this being in the context of electricity providers being abundant in Sweden, offering the same product, basically 100% renewable from wind and solar, etc. And as you could see from the IPCC reports, etc., that the carbon emissions from nuclear was very low. So it just made sense to take a look at that as a marketing offer as well, and what the challenges would be. And that's always what I've liked to do: take something complex and difficult and make it appealing. And that started the snowball, if you like. But I've learned everything just like you have in the past few years, and just picking it up day by day, and it's really a snowball now. So it's quite interesting to see where it goes.
Okay. So I actually have a very interesting question. You mentioned your dad studied nuclear engineering. How much of a factor did you think that played in your early perception of nuclear? Him telling you the positive side that nuclear is, and not just you getting information from media, let's say disaster movies with nuclear fallouts and all these things that normal people grow up with, and just have this word association when they hear nuclear to immediately think of weapons and warfare and things just going horribly wrong. So how much of a factor do you think your father played in your perception of nuclear?
I guess he made a big impression, right? I mean, he said that, John, that power plant that we pass by, because we drive from Gothenburg towards the south of Sweden and on towards Europe, you drive past Ringhals, which is a nuclear power plant now about to close down 2 of its reactors, actually, which is very sad. But he pointed at it and said, look at that. That's the cornerstone of Swedish energy supply. So So I guess his positive stance kind of, it's my father, and if he says that, then I at least ought to look into the facts. So if he was wrong, then I would like to prove him wrong. But turns out he was right. It's an incredibly powerful, way to make baseload energy, and with low carbon emissions, and with a very high reliability and security. So I wish I could have proven him wrong, but I couldn't in that case.
Okay, so could you tell us a bit more about your co-founder Christian? When you went with her with this idea, did she have a background in nuclear energy, and did you just say that? Was she like, oh, okay, just jumped right into the idea? Okay, let's go start a power distribution company, just focusing completely from nuclear.
It's another good question. I can take an example from my other industry, the financial technology industry, where a couple of guys, the Swedish guys, set up a company called Izettle, which basically took card readers and plugged them into mobile phones, and made billions of dollars selling it to PayPal. Those guys knew nothing of the financial industry when they came into it. They were completely oblivious to all of the difficulties that existed in the industry. I think that was a great asset for them, and they proved that if you don't get bolted down with old perceptions of what an industry should be like, you can probably find new ways of doing things. And in that sense, I'm not making the comparison with a unicorn billion-dollar company of any kind, but what I'm saying is that sometimes it's almost beneficial to be green, and to be new, and just learning the facts, studying hard. So back to your point about Christian's an incredible guy, inspirational, and the man reads more reports and books than any of us can do in a lifetime. It feels like there's not a single report on nuclear that I hasn't read in the last 12 months since we started out. I mean, he's like me in the sense that he's entrepreneurial, but he's also very different because he's great with numbers, very strategic with operational items, and I'm more of a marketing, communications, PR kind of person, and we complement each other incredibly well, and that was the starting point. We just looked at it. How do you set up an electricity supplier company? Well, turns out we knew a lot of people who knew how to do that. So I guess our networks also helped out quite a lot. And then we learned on the job, all the way through half of this year, we were just preparing everything, and following the public debate in Sweden, getting more favorable and more favorable. And then we said, okay, let's do it, and we did, and boom. Basically.
Wow. So you mentioned something, 12 months. Is that how long the company has been for? 12 months?
No, the company was I think registered in June, so it's not even it's only six months old as a company. But we had the idea. I guess the first time I had the idea, I told it to Christian actually up when we were up skiing in Norway. I told him, we should look into this. I have an idea, and he instantly jumped on it. I mean, if that's the problem, if I come up with ideas quite often, and if he wouldn't have had the mindset to go in and look at the numbers and look at the opportunities, then we would not have done it. But we did, and it just made perfect sense. He had just had an exit from another startup he had, and he was ready for something new. So it was just favorable conditions. And I think, one of the things that we're really good at is the speed that we move with. We're incredibly agile and capable of doing a lot of things very quick. So yeah, it's very early days, but it's looking very, very interesting. Let's say that, and it's looking very interesting to move into 2020. With this momentum that we have right now. But it's fresh,
yeah,
and
I'm sure it's looking very interesting. So this is Sweden's first 100% nuclear electricity supplier. What was the public reception like when you came up with this idea? Were they taken aback, or were they just welcoming you guys with open arms that this is something that we needed? How was the public response to the announcement? And so far, the last 6 months, How was the public response to it?
Well, I think it's important to understand that we went from saying someone should do it or that's a good idea to getting extremely enthusiastic and extremely devoted and serious about it, and that leading up to the press release issuing on 4th of August this year. I mean, we had done a lot of preparations, created the website for signups, and it needs, in Sweden we have to be GDPR compliant. It was a lot of work, in the process of how do we actually grab interest in a correct manner, but we didn't know what to expect. It was we did it because we believed in it. And to be fair, there was a possibility for you to get 100% nuclear before us, but you had to actually, search for it and call people and, request it sincerely. And most companies that were able to provide it, the large ones, if you like, they're also selling a mix of different energy sources. They weren't too keen to sell it, so we said, let's plant the flag and just say, we are 100% nuclear. We have nothing else. We're here to promote and to build up nuclear as much as we can, because we believe that it has such an important role to play in the future, for Sweden, for Europe, and for the world. So basically, that was the perception. That was the direction of the press release. It came out, and I think within 15 minutes, this was a Sunday, mind you. This was a Sunday in the middle of the summer when nothing's going on and no one reads the press. We released it, and I think within 15 minutes, we had the first media inquiry, saying, wow, can we have an interview? And then Swedish national broadcaster Sveriges Radio phoned us and wanted to do an interview, and then it just kind of snowballed from there. Our website wasn't prepared for the kind of interest that came out of it, but we managed to make it work. We managed to grab these thousands and thousands of names that were interested in giving us their household details, and that really gave us a foundation. After within 24 hours we had easily met the target where we said this is doable. Let's do it. And we thought that would take maybe a month, at least. So we just instantly started working at full speed, bringing everyone that we know, setting up teams. We have teams working with web, with helping me with the communications. We have an app development team. So there's a couple of resources that were all instantly said full alert and let's go. We're going to build a company, and there's nothing that's going to stop us. And the public perception was positive, and Swedes are very rational people. And to come back to your point about what Sweden's like, right? We're very rational, and we like facts. And we were very factual in our press release and in all our communications, and we were clearly showing that this is not nuclear versus renewables. This is nuclear plus renewables fighting against coal power. Coal and gas taking over Europe more and more, at least gas. And that was that I think that struck home, and people understood that we were on the good side, if you like. And then of course it's not for everyone, but if then we would have needed to be a much larger company. So it's for those people like ourselves that really think that it's something that needs to be defended. There's some context, of course. I don't know if you want me to give you the Swedish context of the politics and everything, but there's a reason why it was so provoking when we released it. There was actually, because it was canceled yesterday, there was an agreement between all of the parties in government that saying that by the year 2040, 100% of Swedish electricity grid should be renewable, and that made no sense in a world where electrification, is happening everywhere. You have cars, you have industries switching to electricity, and at the same time, Sweden, who one of the leading nuclear nations in the world, suddenly decides to close down its nuclear plants without replacing them, and by doing that, going into this kind of German situation where you end up using fossil fuels to back up your intermittent energy supply from wind and solar. I mean, they're great when they're working, but there's a full year that needs electricity at all times, and it needs 60% more electricity by the year 2040 in Sweden. So it's not feasible to go for that kind of political decision. And that, of course, was a good opportunity for us to come out and market and say, let's do something. Let's start talking about this. And it worked, because now everyone's talking about nuclear. There's nuclear fatigue in the media currently. Pretty much every article is about nuclear in Sweden right now, and that's great. But there's still so much left to be done, because we need new power plants. I mean, I have so many visions of what should happen with Sweden as a nuclear powerhouse.
Okay, so I think this is going back more to your background in communications, because what the biggest challenge is, from what you said, is how to make people talk about nuclear in a constructive, a very factual way, and not just an emotionally driven, I wouldn't say ridiculous, but not so factual point of this other discussion. Because
those are your words, not mine, Olu.
No, because most of the time it's a situation where once you get someone down and you actually look at the benefits and you weigh them compared to other energy sources. For example, coal is incredibly horrible. Everyone knows coal is horrible, from the air pollution to the mining. It's something that we've known for a very long time, but yet so many countries justify themselves using coal because whatever it is, cheap electricity can be produced locally.
Yeah.
But there are justifications for some things, even though they may not be the best option. But when it comes to nuclear, people don't really seem to push themselves in that direction sometimes. It's kind of like the opposite. So changing this perception that there's something that your company has done that is quite unusual, and I'm sure that this is mostly attributed to you, is your advisory board that you're setting up. So could you just tell a bit about that and what role that has, well, especially in the community and changing the conversation around nuclear?
We should probably not build ourselves up too much, but I think we've participated and contributed to kind of a more informed conversation, if you like. It's something that we were very clear with, and actually, I mean, before we were allowed, if you like, to even start Kärnfull for our wives, we had to convince them. And they came from an anti-nuclear stance, like most Swedes, right? So explaining facts to our own family became the learning lesson for us of how we could work with explaining the facts in an infographical, interesting manner with reliable sources. And it's something that's very important for us. And we have a blog, and we push out a lot of information. It could be about, mortality rates. It could be about carbon emissions. It could be anything related to the industry. And that was probably a starting point. But as we started to progress, we said, one of the things that made us very, interesting and appealing, I think, to the people that like nuclear in Sweden is that we've devoted ourselves to have a donation per sold kilowatt hour. Basically, for every kilowatt hour, we set aside a sum of money that will be allocated to something within science, innovation, or research in the field of nuclear. And this is something that helps people who support nuclear in Sweden to actively donate and contribute to the industry that they believe is important for the future. And doing that, back to your point about advisory board, we had to say, I'm the first one to raise my hand and say, I'm not knowledgeable about everything in nuclear and what the next big thing is or what happens with uranium-238. This is something that I'm intrigued by, but there are experts out there. And that's what we started looking at the advisory board angle. And we started aiming high. We wanted, good names, people that have great knowledge, great platforms, and ambitious as we are, we reached out, and funnily enough, we had people coming from left, right, center, wanting to help out and setting up this advisory board. So I mean, we've attracted names that I would never have thought that we could have done. Jose Gonzalez is one of the world's most successful singer-songwriters. He's an effective altruist, and it's one of Sweden's greatest music exports in the recent times. He I guess he has a lot to lose, if you like, by being pro-nuclear in the public forum. But he's also read the facts, and he's also listened to science, and he wants to support us, and that's wonderful, of course. And then we have someone like him who's like me, not very knowledgeable about the research part of it. So we bring in scientists. So we have two of the greatest scientists in Sweden joining the board as well, Clara Inselander Björk and Christian Ekberg, who's a professor at Chalmers University, who work with nuclear waste management at a very top level of the world. He's one of the most knowledgeable people in waste management in the world. So, and he wanted to join. And then we caught the attention of Kirsty Gogan, who founded Energy for Humanity. She's been a guest on Titans of Nuclear before, and she's a wonderful woman to discuss these topics with. And turns out that she wanted to help out as well. So it just kind of spun from there. And I just now today received the confirmation that Eric Ingersoll is also wanting to join the advisory board. He's also been a guest on Titans of Nuclear. He's the founder of Lucid Catalyst, and an incredibly knowledgeable person within the field of nuclear. And we just keep on building this platform of people that wants to help us. They want to see Kärnfull succeed, and doing the things that we believe are important. Which if you look at it, at the core, we want to make a profitable company, but it's much more important than that. I mean, in the Swedish context, zooming out, we want to ensure that Sweden becomes this nuclear powerhouse, that actually becomes a exporter of nuclear power to our neighboring countries at times when there is no intermittent weather-dependent electricity available. Those are great opportunities for a company like, well, it's almost a company, but a country like Sweden. And then if you span out even more, you look at the whole world, the amount of electricity poverty that surrounds us. This is the place where SMRs makes perfect sense, and someone needs to be advocating them and promoting them. And Kärnfull is very happy if we can help raise awareness of the importance and the brilliance of nuclear power in any sense we can. And the advisory board, of course, helps us. Yeah.
You said SMR. What does that stand for?
So that's a small modular reactor. So there's a bunch of really cool, smaller sized reactors that you can produce in factories and to a much lower cost. When you spoke to Brett Kugelmass a while back, he said there are 5 issues with nuclear, and it's expensive, it's expensive, it's expensive, it's expensive, it's expensive. It doesn't need to be. There's a lot of ways to bring down the cost of nuclear power, and SMRs are one of those ways of doing that. I think I saw an announcement from the startup Oklo in the US last week. They launched a new small modular reactor for remote places where electricity grids are not available, called Aurora. It's a beautiful little machine power plant, and it's one of those areas that I believe Canada is going very heavy into the SMR direction. US as well. In the UK, Rolls-Royce, the old car manufacturer, is now producing, and I mean they're doing a lot of engineering for the aviation business as well. They're doing the same thing. A really cool small modular reactor that they can build in their factories and then ship out. And in that context, these guys are also adding hydrogen production facilities next to their SMR so that they can make synthetic fuels for the aviation industry at the same time. There's so much incredibly cool ways of decarbonizing, segments that are very difficult to decarbonize, like aviation or naval, like the shipping industry, and this is this is all coming back to the point that we need to have more fission power in the world. And you know, it's to me, I've never been more enthusiastic about a topic in my life, to be able to look at all of these angles of you know, how do we provide energy to the people that are underserved? How do we make sure that their living standards are, you know, comparable to what we have in our world? And it's you know, so yes, at one side, Kärnfull Energi is a Swedish electricity provider of 100% nuclear, and then Kärnfull is this kind of umbrella brand of spreading information and facts and knowledge and you know, potentially business to the rest of the world. And that's something that we're so excited about, because there's so much cool things going on in the world of nuclear currently, and it's needed. The world needs nuclear more than ever.
So one thing, has it surprised you how quickly your network has grown in the past 6 months, 8 months, from someone who is just thinking, okay, maybe we can solve some problems in nuclear and really change the public perception, to someone who is now in the industry and actively connected to people who are knowledgeable and who are making a difference in the industry? So has that been something that you've been surprised by, or how have you taken to this new role as being associated publicly? Because I think that's a big deal. I didn't realize it was a big deal until I actually started talking about nuclear. I was like, oh wow, some people don't actually like this, and they're very vocal about it. So how have you adjusted to that, being a public figure right now?
Well, I mean, I don't think it's so much about me as a person. It's about the brand and the company, and you know, Christian, and we're very, you know, loud, I guess, if you like, about our stance, and I think it's, you know, one thing that's very important for us and for Kärnfull is that we're not political in any sense. We have no political background, we have no political agenda, and that's something that is also important, I think, in the way that we built up our reputation. We're talking about the industry. How can Sweden become more competitive? How can the world address, you know, dire needs? And you know, in that context, I think you know, becoming one of those people that are able to speak about it is just an honor. And if you know, I would never have expected us to be propelled. You know, for me to be on a show like this, you know, as quickly as I am, it's an honor. But it's an honor that I really want to take control of and try to use to my best abilities. You know, I love marketing difficult stuff. That's what I do, and that's what I'm good at. And here's something that's difficult that needs to be marketed, so I'm going to do it.
You're definitely in the right place then. Definitely. Okay. So now looking towards the future, the year's ending, the new year is starting out, and you have so many things, I'm sure, that you guys have planned up and you guys are waiting to release. So what is your core values that you guys have seen? Have they grown over time, or is it something that's been reinforced in you guys? So as a company, as Kärnfull Energy, and you and Christian individually, what has grown, or what have you learned along the way that you would take into the next year and into the next years of operations for Kärnfull Energy?
Well, that's a great question. I mean, you know, allow yourself to dream big is, I think, something that people should do from time to time. But you know, it's difficult to take that step to me for many reasons, because we're now struggling as a startup company just to get going, you know, financially and stably. I think things are looking great. You know, I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. Things are looking really good, and we're going to be able to continue doing this for a long period of time. But it's such early days, you know. But between me and Christian and the you know, visionary sessions that we have, there's so many things that I'm so excited about being able to announce. You know, we have a very cool idea, you know, and halfway there in terms of development for Q2 next year. I can't talk about it at this stage for obvious reasons, but it's an interesting prospect. We were taken aback by the European interest, if you like, for Kärnfull. Even before this advisory board of these well-known people came on board, the French started talking about us. The Danes were very early, in Denmark they talked about us very early on. You know, it caught the eye of people, and I guess it's timing. It's all about timing. Releasing a company like this in the year 2019 was apparently the right time to do it. in terms of at least getting attention. Let's see if we can materialize. But I'm positive that we can, and if we can, then of course making Sweden a nuclear pro country fully. I mean, we have there are polls showing that almost 78% of Swedes are positive to maintaining or building new nuclear. So it's a really good starting ground for us. But there's still that friction in the media and I guess in politics that means that there is still a space for a company like ours to build up the knowledge base. Our core vision, if you like, is to be able to change dinner table conversations around the world when it comes to nuclear. We want to be able to give people enough information to have a conversation with someone at dinner about nuclear power without it becoming dogmatized or odd. That's that could take my whole life. So that's a vision that's probably going to be difficult to fulfill quickly, but we have a lot of really cool short-term goals that I wish I could tell you about. But for this moment, we're going to roll the ball forward. We're going to see Kärnfull kick off as a strong Swedish electricity provider. I see our social media engagement. I think we're already, in the top ranking of most liked companies in this segment, etc. So it's we're just going to try keeping on. I mean, you're talking to us at a very early stage, and hopefully we can look back and laugh at this interview in a few years' time. But it's mind-blowing the things we can accomplish now with the network we have and the support we have and with all the followers we have. So we want to continue the momentum into 2020 and then looking up. If I can talk about visionary ideas, it's funny, the last week, 3 or 4 different people have asked us, Kärnfull Energy, a startup company, if we would be interested in, not officially, but if we, why don't you guys take over the Ringhals nuclear power plant, the reactor 1 and 2 that are now being closed down? We're laughing, but it's also something that, me and Christian discussed that idea back in April, that we should be doing that instead. Because those reactors that are now being closed down due to political and dogmatized reasons are insanely profitable. I mean, they're making 1.8 billion Swedish crowns of profit every year now, and it's crazy to close them down when the world needs as much electricity as it can, and yet we're closing them down. These are the same kind of reactors that the Turkey Point in the U.S. they were just prolonged so that they can continue operations up for 8, that they're 80 years old when they retire. These are only 40 years old. These are the same reactors. So these guys, given the right love and maintenance, these reactors can continue to provide clean, green, beautiful energy to Sweden for a very long time. Now, the situation is we're closing one down, the reactor 2, by the end of this year, and then the reactor 1 is closed down at the end of 2020. If there's a way for Kärnfull and all of our followers and friends to play a part in keeping that on the grid, then that is a huge save. I mean, we're talking those 2 reactors closing down means another 8 million tons of carbon dioxide going up into our atmosphere, because it's the way it's going to be replaced. And that's of course bizarre in a world struggling for every single gram of carbon dioxide and trying to keep it down. So that would be amazing. And in general, it frustrates me when I see Elon Musk, now setting up the gigafactory in Berlin. The gigafactory 4, number 3 is in China, and number 4 is going to be in Germany. And Germany has one of the dirtiest European electricity grids, and he's going to put a gigafactory in Germany where they struggle with the Energiewende, and they have intermittent wind and coal. They're opening a new coal plant now in January, and they're going to use Russian gas to create Teslas or the batteries, and this is just mind blowing to me. I mean, if Elon is listening, then I tell you, call us and we'll fix fix you a site in Sweden hooked up to a reactor, and you can continue making your awesome cars that we love just there in Sweden, where we have nuclear electricity. It's mind-blowing. I mean, of course, what the German industry always does, and the same way he will do it, he will greenwash it by buying the guarantees of origin from Norway, hydro or something like this, and that's a different market. But that's not going to help. I mean, the cars or the products are still being produced on dirty German energy or electricity. And that, there's a lot of things that on a macro level frustrates me, that I would love to be a part of. Of course, that's way out of our reach, but why not dream big? We've created something, we have momentum, we have people who are talking about Kärnfull. We would love to play an important part in the future in every way we can. And to do that, we need customers in Sweden. But then, once we have that, let's go.
Definitely. I'm sure we would look back to this conversation with a large air of funness, and I'm really expecting for that time. It's been wonderful having you on the show. It's nice to see your passion for the industry. It's nice to see you have this genuine drive to want to change things and really change how the conversation goes. And I'm excited to follow up on the work that Kärnfull will be doing in the next year as well. And thank you so much. My regards to Christian. It's really nice having you on this podcast, and I'm sure that everyone will find this conversation quite insightful as well.
Well, I'm not sure insightful, but fun at least, or intriguing, or inspiring. Thank you very much, Ola. Have a great night.
John. Thank you so much.